my friend, my mentor, my colleague. Thank you for being on the Be Love podcast.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
It's wonderful to be with you. It's always so good to be with you. I feel like you are one of the people who has deeply nurtured me in love during my decades of ministry and life in this church. You pushed me out into preaching without notes for the first time, like a little bird pushing me out of the nest. So we had a lot of wonderful experiences during my internship at Royal Oak. And I've had many other experiences since. I wonder what's on your heart today. What aspects of this conversation around love and how love calls us in life? You know, the premise of this podcast is about love, but also exploring the role of love in what church is. You know, I think at the heart of being church is this call to love one another. And how do we do that, Renee? What helps you to love other people and to nurture love in community?
Well, I'll start with the opposite. I think I learned about what real love is from a childhood where I had a mom who was 100% loving, and she was. I never wondered that she loved me. My dad had to go through some therapy, and he bravely did. He loved me, but he didn't know how to show it early on, and so I felt like I was always looking for love, because I really looked up to my dad. He was ordained in our church and had the Hillside, El Cerrito, California church for a couple of years. But his own integrity had him leave it because he could think theology and faith, but he wasn't feeling it in his heart. He needed to go through some intensive therapy to find that love. So consequently, I entered into my young adulthood searching for love. I always felt empty, lonely, bored, and had a brief experience with a roommate in college I was looking for love, the romantic kind of love, not the God love.
Yeah.
And she said, well, why don't we sit down and eat some ice cream one night? And I said, well, I don't want to gain any weight because I want to attract love. And she said, well, you don't have to keep the calories. So she was basically saying, you can be bulimic. You can eat what you want and then get rid of it. And so I was doing that for about a month, and I was getting way too thin. And one day my cousin came into town and said, Renee, you don't look good. You look too skinny. I was not eating well. And so one night I was standing in front of a mirror without clothes on, and I saw my bones, and I fell to my knees. And I wasn't praying like the religious kind of prayer, but I fell to my knees and I looked up to the ceiling, and I just started thinking to myself, I can't imagine anything that could make me feel good in this moment. I was just completely without love. I was empty and desperate. It's like I was like, I can't keep being bulimic because I'm gonna get sick. And I was too embarrassed to tell my parents, because we were raised to be more conscientious than that, to be more thoughtful in how we lived. And so I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody. So here I am, too skinny and not living in the right way and lonely. And my mom calls out of the blue, and she says, I don't know why I'm calling you, but I just want you to know I love you. And I started to cry, and I said, I got to go, Mom. Thanks. I needed that. And I hung up, and I went to bed that night and had my first Christ vision. And so it was 3 a.m, which is often when I have poignant dreams or visions. And I was thrust up to the ceiling in my room, and I was just there was a hand, and I just kind of knew it was God, but it was just a hand kind of pushing my head and my neck up to the ceiling. And I was very uncomfortable, so that most of my dream vision was just feeling uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden the hand kind of let me down a little bit, and I straightened up, and I had a kink in my neck. And so I turned to my left in the dream, and there's nothing there. And I turned to the right in my dream, and there is Christ, really close. And he's smiling at me, and he's talking very quietly. And he knows I have one deaf ear from childhood. And he keeps talking very quietly, and I can't hear him. And so I get bored. There is the Christ, like right there in front of me. And I'm like, well, I can't hear him. What's over here? So I turn back to the left, knowing that there's nothing over here. And here is the Christ. And then all of a sudden, I'm thrust down past the floor, not to hell, just to get my attention. Like, Renee, wake up. And then Rhett, my oldest brother, who is like my best friend growing up, was knocking, literally in real time, was knocking on my apartment door, come to pick me up for the end of that semester of college to go home to be with the family for the summer. So he wakes me up, and I'm just shook, of course, in the best way. Not at all felt punished. All I could say to you, Sage, is that we drove home along the mountain curves toward Brookings, Oregon. And when we'd stop to get something to eat, I'd ask every stewardess, can I have as many napkins as you'll give me? Because what happened was, from that contact, floods of insights started to come in, and I was writing them down one after the other on these napkins. And all the emptiness that I ever felt in my whole life, including the moment of being bulimic and eating so that I could eat what I wanted, but I didn't want to get fat because I wanted to attract love, all that emptiness just vanished. And there was this feeling of love overflowing like in a fountain inside of me. And to this day, it feels as real and as intense as when it happened. There's just a sense of fullness and love overflowing. And one of the insights after the dream was that my whole life had been read in those seconds where his face was staring at me and smiling. I felt like he read every sentence and every chapter, jot and tittle is what traditional language, I just felt like every aspect of my being and my experiences were known, and they were all read and known with mercy. So I was flinching as I was thinking about the Christ knowing me and all the things I did that was good and that was naughty. And there was nothing to flinch at. There was complete compassion and mercy and understanding as to why I did what I did or what I didn't do. And that is my fullest experience of what true love is. It doesn't diminish. I'm in year 30. And when I share it with you, which is a gift to answer your question, what is love and how is love moving in my life, in the church, it's as real as if it happened this morning. So that is kind of an eternal fountain of youth and love that was given at a time when I was literally emptying out. Yeah. I was just nothing. I just felt like nothing. And I couldn't tell my parents, who I've always trusted. Mm-hmm. I've had some longing to be closer to my father because he loved me, but he couldn't show it. And so there was that emptiness. But since then, I've been able to be honest, which is part of the trinity of your ministry. Yeah. I've been able to say to my dad, I didn't think you even liked me. I thought I should have been a boy. I thought you didn't want me or like me. And I didn't even think you loved me. That wasn't even a question. I didn't even entertain that, and he's sitting there going, what? I couldn't love you more. But I'm the kind of person, and I think children are, where they need their parents. I needed him to show me, to say, I love you, Renee. And he just couldn't do it. It wasn't the way he was formed, and he didn't understand that I was needing that. And I know now that he loves me. Part of the flood of that Christ gift and that Christ love is that it's enabled me to be honest with my Father. And he's been able to honestly say back what I've needed to hear. But I needed to grow up in order to ask him, because the little girl in me didn't know how to ask him.
She didn't know how to do it. Well, Renee, you've just, this is why I do this podcast, because I've known you for a long time, and I don't know you've ever told me that.
I don't think I have.
Story.
I haven't.
Hearing it feels like a perfect reflection of how you move in the world. I can see how that is your foundation, that feeling of belovedness and that cup overflowing. And that is how it goes, right? This is how it's gone for all the mystics and all of the teachers, is that emptying out. It's when we're at our lowest. I know that's been my experience as well. When as painful as it is, we're we get that we can't do this on our own, or that we're not meant to, that there's
Right.
something bigger going on. Wow. So how old were you?
When that came to me, I was about, um, well, I went into college at 18. I was about 20.
Maybe
I was
20.
about
Okay.
20. Yeah.
So I know it's been a long journey since then, but what was the integration process like after that vision? Where
Good
did it lead you?
question.
Yeah,
Great question, interviewer. Yeah, that's the question, I
it
think.
is.
How do you integrate it? Well, yeah. So it wasn't a conscious call to ministry at that moment. It was a conscious call to being happy, right? Because I wasn't happy. I was trying to be happy. It wasn't long before that I was sitting in a bathtub ready to slice my wrist. I mean, I had gotten that low, but right when I was putting the razor blade to my wrist, I heard a voice say, "What are you doing?" And there was a giggle, not making fun of me, but it was like an angel saying, "Oh my goodness." I felt like something was seeing me and saying, "This is not the way." It wasn't at all critical. It was kind of like somebody on the other side was giggling, like, if only you could feel and see yourself the way I'm seeing you now, you would put that razor blade down. And I did. I was just like, oh my goodness, what was that? And I put the razor blade down and I started to go about my day. And I didn't even hardly think twice about it. It was just like a quick little visitation of how somebody else was seeing me, because I wasn't seeing me. I wasn't seeing my goodness. Somebody else was seeing it and saying, "What are you doing?" And it wasn't at all a put down. It was
Yeah.
glorious. It was delightful. And so that had happened maybe a week before the Christ vision. And after the Christ vision happened too, then I started to crave everything, and not in a fanatical way at all, not in a compulsory way, but I just craved, I loved the cross. I loved seeing crosses. I went to a Bible store and I found a plaque uh, about prayer. But the biggest thing that happened was is when I graduated from high school, my grandmother, my father's mother, Gwen Billings, had given me her Bible, and I pulled it out. It was, I mean, literally it had a little dust on it and stuff. It was in college, and I pulled it out. I had to look for it. And I opened it up, Sage. I just opened it up. You know how people say you open it up and you read what you want to read. I don't even remember the words, but what I remember is when I opened it, all of the letters looked like pure gold, and like soft gold, like pure gold is, and like it was full of layers of meaning. So, and I had not read Swedenborg at that point, right? Not really. A little bit maybe with talking to dad at home and stuff. But anyway, I opened the word and I saw these gold letters, and I just felt like there was life at many levels inside every word. And it was like another kind of mini little vision experience or something. It just, so then I found a plaque of the Lord's Prayer and I put it over my bed. And it was like this awakening.
Yeah.
Right. So still not a call to ministry consciously, but just kind of like, there's something in me and out there that's love, that loves me. And it's not even a question. I mean, there isn't even a question mark with it. It just is, and that's the kind of love, which is why I love your ministry too. It's like you're starting with love, you're moving into honesty, going into how do you live that, usefulness. But the source of all of it has to be this love that somehow or another each of us can tap into in our own time, in our own way. And for me, the integration of that vision experience was just living with this feeling like I wasn't alone, just this feeling that there is something greater than self, that I identify as Christ because that's the form that it came to in my dream. Nobody said you have to be Christian in order to be saved. Nobody said that to me. I'm glad. But it really was just a personal contact that was made to me that told me I wasn't alone, that love is real. It's overflowing. It's everywhere. You don't have to beg for it. You don't have to barter. You don't have to have something to feel it. It's just like there's more than enough. And if you give it away, there's even more. But, there's just, it's kind of like walking into a refrigerator full of food, and the food never goes away. You just keep getting whatever you want
Yeah.
when you're hungry. I'll have this today, and then I'll walk in and there's more of this. But it's, of course, much different than food. But that's the earthly kind of comparison, is like, especially with so many people who are hungry physically in not just in our country, but Gaza and, all the places where our children are starving and our people are starving. It's just divine love is always overflowing and there. And so I continued. I got my degree in psychology and in social work. I was all ready to get my master's degree in social work with an emphasis in counseling. And I had earned a nice scholarship. I'd met my grad professors. But that summer, I had gone through a very rough trauma of I was raped by 3 men in college. So I developed an ulcer. And what happened then is I was married at that time to my first husband, and I didn't know how to work that out with him. And he didn't know how either. And so counseling wasn't something that he wanted to do, and I didn't know how to really deal with my feelings of trauma. So we broke up, but the thing was, I was really close to starting my grad classes with social work and counseling. And then, Sage, talk about integration. I remembered the dream back in undergrad when Christ came to me. And I knew that it was the answer to healing after that trauma. And that counseling and social work help get us, for me, this is my belief, is that we need counseling and we need social work services to get us to the precipice of our source when we're actually ready enough to let God heal us. And sometimes, and a lot of times, we're not ready for that yet. And we need the counseling, and we need years of it. I've had 10 years of it, but I realized right before I started my grad classes at Case Western Reserve that ministry was the way to healing for me. Counseling would not take away the ache of what I'd been through. Not really. And I remembered back to the dream when Christ came up to me, and it was such a feeling of total love and fullness. And that's what I was so broken at that moment that I knew that was the source. It was the only thing really that could transform the pain of that into a productive life. And so I gave my scholarship to the first runner-up, and she was very happy, and I pray she's happy and doing well. She needed it. And I went on to the Swedenborg School of Religion that fall after. So that's when I started. And and in many different ways throughout my ministry, the last 30 years, I have utilized, talk about being useful, through being honest about what has happened with my life as far as the trauma. And I've, co-led battered women's support groups. I've been a foster mom for a little bit. I'm a police chaplain. I'm a cancer chaplain now. In the last 20 years, I've been doing these things. And I feel like everything that has been broken inside of me, including my young life where I didn't know if I was loved or liked, all of the broken places now are being used through me to help others find their version of that kind of love. Because if I know that if I can experience this kind of Christ love, anybody can. And I want to midwife that for people. I want to help them get to the precipice of their own experience. Not everybody has dream visions. Everybody's way is different. And I would never assume that anybody or most people would have them, but everybody has their own way to love, which is why I value your ministry. Because if somehow people can find even a portion of that love, they'll be happy. And it is through being honest about what has happened to them, or who, any of us, what has happened to me, that love can transform and use in a good way. And that's the story of my life is, and I've had other traumas in my early life, which aren't really the point, so I don't need to go into them. But, it's really about all these broken places inside of me that all of a sudden made sense. It's not that I'm glad they happened. I wouldn't wish them on anybody, but they have happened. And then this incredible love found me. I wasn't even really asking for it. When I was staring in that mirror without clothes on, too thin from bulimia, I looked up. That was a body prayer. My head was not saying, Lord, help me. I was not honest, to be honest with you. I was not asking God for help, but my body was like this. And I was just asking the question, I can't think of anything that could make me feel good in this moment. I just can't think of anything. And it was a kind of a prayer. It wasn't like a fancy religious prayer. It was a body prayer and a desperate question. How is it integrated? This love that has found me has helped me help others to find their version of whatever it is that feels
love
like
is.
love.
I was very struck by the way you described yourself in front of the mirror and that hopelessness. And I think listening to you immediately just comes, I think so many people feel that. I mean, I've met so many people who feel that emptiness and that not knowing. And what a thing to be filled. What a thing to be given that experience of being filled. And I love how organic it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and I think there is this natural process that we can go through in life of losing everything and yet making room to gain so much. And I know I have a similar dream vision. We'll share that. We'll save that for another day. But I think one of the questions I carry for myself, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, is having been filled by the source, by God, by Jesus, in a way that you didn't, there was no formula. It just came.
Yes.
What is this role of now living that in the world, Renee? How do you, because personally, now that I've had that experience too, I want to give it to everybody. I want to
Right.
I want it to just flow out. And I don't always know how. I don't always, because because you can't communicate it really in words. It's so much bigger than words. What are some of the ways that you feel like you've been able to transmit this love to others or to wake it up in them?
A great question. I think presence and listening. I think those two are the two top answers. I think being present with someone communicates a lot of that love. It shows value in the other, worth, love kind of beyond words, before words. I think how we come across, if we're really cherishing the other, they'll pick that up. And, that's, Christ in my vision didn't really say anything that I could hear. Now,
Right.
what's interesting, in the dream, God knew that I had trouble hearing I can't hear out of my right ear. So creatively, God whispered just quiet enough that I knew that I would stop paying attention. And one of my lessons there is pay attention to your life, right? You're not paying attention because, when you have deafness, it's easy to check out of conversations and just kind of nod. I can't hear you, so I'm just, I'm not really with you. I can't hear you, and then my mind is in a daydream and it's not in reality. And so Christ is basically saying, come back to reality, pay attention to life, pay attention to your life. That was one of the main messages, but there were millions of messages in it.
Well, it's such an important message, though, and that's one I wonder about. That was one of the messages I am continually trying to integrate. Is I realize that we're so pulled to not give attention to our lives, to not think that they're worthy, to think all these other things out here. Calling people to giving attention to their lives is also a way we can love. I know you had more to say, but I'm curious, what helps you to keep your attention on yourself, Renee? What do you feel like you've heeded that message in your life?
It's so basic. It is so basic that God gave us these thinking, rational minds. And so we're very attracted to thoughts. We're like obsessively drawn to thinking, which is a gift. It's part of the God mind too. And, much more gets conveyed by presence than anything else. More gets remembered by presence. What we say, even as preachers, I don't even remember what I say when I preach a week later. What was it that I said? I don't know. It's okay. But people remember how they feel, in your presence. That's what love does. Love makes an impact. It's the loudest impact, not thinking and words, but love. So when, that presence of the Christ was so full, it was presence itself, and so it taught me that that's really what I can give. I mean, yesterday I spent 4 hours with a woman whose husband was tragically killed in a car accident in Florida recently. And he was the love of her life, and they found each other later in life, so she didn't have a lot of time with him. And then his life was taken by somebody who broke a red light. And she was 25 and not paying attention, and bam, there goes her love. I spent 4 hours with her, and of course I said things, but what mattered was how I was there. Was I really there? Because as soon as she could pick up that I was really listening, and that's the second answer to your question, it's presence and listening, then things can come out of her that she kind of already knew, but she needed to say it in order to really consciously get it, So I think that this first part of the Trinity of your ministry is key, although honesty is really, and usefulness, of course, are incredibly important. But if you don't start with love and you don't start with this kind of presence, the other two can't happen. You think they're happening, but they're not really, So this presence of love itself, which I identify as Christ, because that's how it came to me, is what I want to help people find. That's why I'm in ministry. That's how I'm integrating it, is in ministry. Even the least, Jesus said, if you love the least of me, least of you, you're loving me. I have people in my church who are just really struggling, and they're not, to your average American, they're not impressive. They're not impressive people. They don't have resources. They don't have self-worth. Maybe they don't have good health. But that Christ vision, every time that I listen to them and pay attention and show them that I care, I'm integrating that vision, that dream further. So nothing's wasted, nothing's wasted.
Nothing is wasted. And I can hear that in you, and I've certainly witnessed in you the way you show up for others and kind of embody that overflowing love. Do you feel like you are able to bring that overflowing love to yourself in moments when it's just Renee? Do you need other people to hold space for you? What is it? How do you keep that attention on yourself?
Good question. Both and, in the sense that I must take care of myself. And how I do that is I walk a lot with my dog. I spend time in nature. I'm learning the guitar. So taking guitar lessons, and I'm doing things. I like to garden, but mostly walk quietly. I don't sit and meditate like I used to. I used to do a lot of quiet, silent meditation. Did do a vision quest in the Apache tradition the summer of my ordination. And this vision quest, because the president of our seminary, every Wednesday, she would bring in somebody different from a different religious tradition, so that as ordinands, after going through seminary, we would have a much better understanding of different religions going out into the world. So we would have an appreciation and a better understanding of what is good about this religion. And so she brought in a Native American Apache teacher one Wednesday, and it drew my attention. So I decided to learn Apache philosophy and medicine and Apache vision questing. And I did that in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, the summer of my Swedenborgian Christian ordination. And I did that seeking a vision to understand not my Christian ordination, because I understood who Christ was for me. But I wanted to seek a vision in the Apache tradition just to understand better another way that the divine might reach us. And that's 4 days and nights in the woods with only water, no food, seeking a vision in a prayerful state. And not talking about all the details of that magnificent 4 days, but after a rainstorm and spending a cold night wet in the woods, I woke up and the sun started to shine. And boy, the sun never felt so good because my sleeping bag got wet and I was literally just sleeping in a puddle all night, cold and wet. And when the sun came out, I remember thinking, wow, this is God. Really, this is the warmth of God's love. And I felt like something was staring at me behind me. And I looked back into the woods, and there were in my mind, I could see 12 medicine men and women standing at the edge of the forest looking at me. And there were 6 masculine and 6 feminine, and they were angels, really. They were angels, and they were standing at a distance waiting for me to see them. And as soon as I saw them, they all stepped forward with 1 foot, and then they vanished. Years later, and I really didn't invoke any memory of them for about 10 years. I got my ordination in San Francisco. Reverend Edwin Capon ordained Kit and I in Kenichi Kunyeda. And so I'm in Royal Oak for about 10 years. And this man comes up to me, Mark, and he's dying of a rare liver cancer. And he said, Renee, I'm desperate. He said, will you laying on of hands for me? And I said, of course. And I'm thinking that I'll ask the Lord to keep him alive, to find resources, to bless him. And I put my hand, so he laid on my couch, and this is the office that you knew. And I laid my hands on his liver. And all of a sudden, Sage, I see the 12 from my vision quest 10 years later. I'm not even calling on them. I'm not asking for them. They just all of a sudden, they're standing there. And one of them steps forward. Just one. And then they disappear. And so what happened was that as I was doing weekly laying on of hands with this man named Mark, he lived long enough because there was a shortage of livers at the time. People who had had tragic accidents, and he could get a transplant. And there was nothing. He was on the list, but nothing was coming. And what he needed was to stay alive long enough for a liver. And so I was a part of this journey, and I would put my hands on his liver for almost a year, and I would see this one step forward. And I was learning, Sage. I didn't know what this was. But essentially what was happening is there's these resources on the other side of life that, whether you call it Christ or angels or medicine men and women, this, and then I think this speaks to your ministry. It's like, you can have a focused Christ experience like I did, and it changed everything. My life will never be the same. And thank God. I'm never bored. I'm never empty. I'm never lonely, which is miraculous because my whole life was lonely before that. So, whether it's through Christ or through a native tradition or through energy healing or, nature, whatever, however the divine reaches one of us, is how love finds us. And if it's going to change us, it's going to be love. And so I just want to help people because I just constantly feel it in me. I just feel this fountain. I mean, I'm telling you, every day I have the image of a fountain in my heart. And it just keeps coming. I mean, it's just never ending, flowing. And it's just such a gift. And I know, and everybody has their use and their purpose, which hopefully your ministry helps people find that, because it's the third part of the Trinity. It's you find this love and you're honest about what's broken or what you long for or what's going well. And then you'll live it. Right? If I can help people find that in their own way, it doesn't matter really how. It just, I think the reason that Christ came to me is because on both sides of my family, 4 generations back are Swedenborgian ministers. On my mom's side, 4 generations, and my dad's side. So I tried to run for the hills. I tried not to be a Swedenborgian minister.
Yes.
I didn't want to do it automatically. I didn't want to do it to please them. In fact, I went into counseling and social work as my response to being such a part of a lineage. I wanted to do my own thing. But here comes Christ in the middle of a crisis, and it changes everything. He changes everything. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And I think listening to you and knowing you, I wonder, part of my wondering about how we are the church in the world is it just seems like you do all of this very naturally. Mm-hmm. And that it's about, it comes just from your being, and I think that's one of the suppositions I hold is that, yes, we can tell people things, and yes, we can, accomplish things and make things. But those are all things. We're alive. We're beings. We're human beings with a divine connection. And I love hearing that love is still flowing and that it's moving. And have there been moments where it stopped? Have there been moments of?
Ooh, great question. And I have an answer for you.
Okay.
You're a very good interviewer.
Okay.
Love it. Well, there was a summer. So Joe and I, my husband Joe, we were trying to have children. And I always identified as someone who would be a mother. And I have autoimmune problems and health problems. And I couldn't. And what turns out later is that way down the line, we found out from a different doctor that my progesterone was really low. And that probably, if I would have raised my progesterone, I probably could have got pregnant. So we didn't know that. But at the time, we were trying to have children and we couldn't. So we tried to adopt. And there were 5 attempts, but 3 real serious attempts. And each time, even though the lawyer said there's about a 10% chance that the birth mother will change her mind and she'll keep the baby. Well, every time the birth mothers kept their babies, and we had, it was an open adoption. So we had paid for her gestational expenses, her health bills, and all of that. So at the end of these 3 tries, we were penniless and babyless, right? Actually had bankruptcy. We had to file bankruptcy and we had no baby. So I remember the summer when we were waiting for news about this 3rd baby being born. And then we got the call from the lawyer because the baby's born. We were all on vacation, and my family, and we got the news that it wasn't going to happen. And I just bawled, and my whole family just put their hands on my body and let me cry. And I threw up. I was so upset. And so I realized after this, we have no money and I'm getting older and no baby. So we went home from vacation and I was laying on the couch and it was nighttime and I was looking up in the sky and I realized, it wasn't going to be for me, And then all of a sudden, I couldn't access my faith. It was so gone that I had to say to my board of trustees in my church, I think you need to find another minister because I can't tell you that the Bible's true. I don't know if God's real. I can't preach in good faith knowing that I don't have faith. And I told them, what was going on. And I said, you probably want to find somebody, And they said, no, we'll wait for you. And I said, it's flat. And the best way to describe how I felt was like, when you look out on a farm field and you see things growing and you can tell there's life there, there's crops growing. But inside of me felt like a field that was lying fallow. It was completely it was dirt, basically. It wasn't dry dirt, which is interesting. It was very moist, rich dirt, but it was just dirt. And I loved your answer that you were an earthworm at the adult retreat.
Yes.
Anyway.
Dirt is a holy thing.
Yes. So, but inside of me, I felt like a farm field that was lying fallow and nothing was growing. And I spent the summer not leading worship. I said, I can't do it, but I can lead a discussion group. Let's find a topic. Let's discuss it. And you guys can, talk about what you think and feel. And so I did that for a summer. And the only thing that I did have, Sage, was that something was like rubbed up against my right side. I mean, this sounds really crazy, but I felt like there was this body sticking to me on my right side and it wasn't leaving me. It was like physical. It was like, get off me, kind of thing. What do
No.
I don't know what this is, but get away, But there was something very close to me and just kind of gently pushing on me, telling me that this was there. So the summer comes and goes, and it's September. And I wake up one morning, and all of a sudden, it's back. It's back in spades. It's like, whereas my faith was one dimensional before, not that I felt that it was, because I had the Christ vision before, but this felt like a three-dimensional garden. And I woke up seeing corn and beans and all kinds of things growing in my mind. And I was back and I was better. And it was a Sunday morning and they were not expecting me to preach. And I walked into church with my collar on and I preached. And boy, was it right. It was honest. And I talked about all the honest doubts and fears and emptinesses that, having lost my faith for this summer, it was a summer of no faith. But what it brought was a much deeper, multidimensional faith after basically my identity had to crash, I think, is what it felt like. My identity as a mother. So it had to reconfigure. I still feel like a mother now, but differently. So it's kind of the vastation that Swedenborg talks about. I went into a vastated state of nothingness because what I thought I was going to be wasn't. And so I needed some space and some time and some love. The last part of the story is the most beautiful part, which is that the whole congregation made a decision to pray for me while I honestly couldn't be what they needed me to be. So their prayers brought me back.
I mean, just hearing about that, I had heard that story before, and I've always been so impressed that you had cultivated this community that could see you through such an experience. I mean, I do feel like that's so vital. It's like love is overflowing, yes. And part of that overflow is we're called to go through these processes of growth, some of which are devastating.
Devastating. That's very good insight. And that's why your ministry is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's why yours is working.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have a lot in the Royal Oak community. I mean, that's a really beautiful test case. I don't know, something because, and I love that your willingness to be honest with them about your doubts birthed this new 3D, even more three-dimensional experience of love. And we got to ride those waves.
Ooh.
We can't fake it or hide from it. And each one, I do believe it leads us to deeper and deeper levels of love.
Sure does. And that's a great point, that I could be honest with them.
Yes.
And I saw something on Facebook. It's some sort of neurobiological research that's being done that when we're able to be honest, physiologically, we heal better,
We're in alignment. And I mean, this is the vision of the holy city, right? The light is always on. So there's no ability to lie. There's no subterfuge. And I think for a lot of us, that's terrifying. But I think as you go down this journey, I certainly hold the question, what's the use of lying? And we're learning that actually it causes harm to our bodies if we're not able to be honest. So honesty is really when we're there. And even as you were in that horrible pain, you were being honest. And I wonder how much heaven was still present.
Well, I think it was that was bumped up against me. That was heaven. That was the Lord, for me, that was the Christ that had visited me a while back, but I didn't identify, which is why I believe in a ministry that is not only Christocentric, but universal, because sometimes what we need is not the specific church. Sometimes what we're ready for is something more universal and unnameable. If we're really hurting, we might be threatened by something too specific. If we're really lost, we might need something kind of general. that is loving. That's how I was. I wasn't ready to say, I believe in you, Lord. At that point, I was just like, no, I'm rebelling here.
But I love that you believed in your church and you believed in the people around you
Well,
enough to be
I
honest
would
with them.
say, I don't know if I believed in them, but I don't know if I believed in anything at that point. But what I will say is that I cared about them. So I nurtured a discussion. That's all I can say. I'm not saying I believed in anything or anyone at that moment, which is why I needed a general presence of love sticking to me. I was not at all ready to say that was the Lord,
Yeah.
even though it was. I was like, and I was even like, get off me. I don't know what this is. I was just lost. I was hurting.
I love your honesty, Renee. I love the way all of this is unfolded. Sometimes with your participation and permission, and sometimes not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's such a journey we're all on. I'm so glad to be on it with you, and I'm excited to see what will come next on the journey of Renée
Oh,
Machiniak. Who knows?
I know. And now I have this friend who is completely blind, and I would love for you to interview her,
Yes, she's next.
Karen Burke.
Yeah.
But she's teaching me some things. And part of me is, is just like, I don't understand. But I love her, and I'm just like, okay, God is bringing me a totally new kind of person now. And I get this feeling like it's all kind of related to what you're being given as far as a vision. There's something going on, I think, with you and me and others too. It's the new adventure, like you talked
It's
about.
the new adventure. I love that. And I love that saying, I don't understand, but I love you.
Yes.
And I feel like that's such a beautiful, that might have to be the title of our conversation.
Yes. Fine. Yep.
Because love can make room for understanding and to be willing to be humble and that we don't always understand, but maybe that's okay because something new is coming into being that we don't know yet.
And just as a final thought, a woman came to my church once and she had been systematically abused as a child in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, right? Like she was like, while she was being abused, the name of the Lord was being evoked. So when she would come, she really liked me. There was this alignment. It felt really good. But she goes, Renee, I can't keep coming. I can't come to a church that talks about Christ. And I said, can you explain this to me? She goes, well, I do love God, but every time I hear the name Jesus or Christ, I want to throw up because I was hurt in that name. But she was such a beautiful soul that was searching for a loving God, but the Christian church can't work for her because she was hurt in that name. And my experience of the Christ that came to me is there's no place in that for rejecting her. It has to be a more universal God for her. And so this new church flowing down from heaven, from God, needs to make space for people who have been hurt or who have no connection to the Christian part. But I think we need to, of course, be Christian, and we need to make a lot of room for people who need another way. Because
perhaps for where that love is calling us to go that we don't quite know yet. Oh, thank you, my friends. Thank you for all the ways you show up.